So the Cars 3 stock cars, or just the veteran racers, are a set of 35 racers, most of which just appear in the background and have 0 lines. So I decided to rank them all from worst to best. Something I've done a couple of times already in the past, but this time I decided I would talk more in depth about the racers and why I find them appealing or boring. Since, like I said, most of these are just background racers with 0 lines, and since they haven't been as fortunate as the Cars 1 racers, who all received their own character biographies, I'm going to mostly have to rank them by design, as well as their coloration, and that's really it, since that's pretty much all I can go off by. There might be some other stuff I talked about, like details of them in the movies, or something about their die costs, or just personal things. Now, I'm going to split each racer into a tier. First off, there's the D tier, which are cars I just think are okay. I don't dislike them, but I don't find them to be exciting in any way, shape or form. They lean more on the good side than the bad side. See them as 6 out of 10s. Next is the C tier. Cars in here I think are pretty good. I think they're decently designed, but they have quite a bit of things pulling them down, or just being a bit bland. See them as 7 out of 10s. The B tier comes after that, where the cars are pretty great. I think they have at least a somewhat good design, or a nice color scheme. See them as 8 out of 10s. After that is the A tier. Cars which I find to be really appealing, with either having a really cool design or a really awesome color scheme, or possibly even both. See them as 9 out of 10s. And finally, there is the S tier. Cars that are on this tier I think have great designs and great coloration, and are as close to perfection when it comes to silent background racers. See them as 10 out of 10s. But with that out of the way, let's jump into the ranking list. Finding its way to the back of the pack, we find the Apple stock car. Now, why is the Apple Racer my least favorite? Well, I just think they're really boring. The only thing that's on them is the logo of the sponsor and the number, something that literally every other racer also has, on top of having actual designs. I know it was stated in the Mackay Cars character biography, who's the Cars 1 Apple Racer, that he likes things clean and simple, which I can understand, but that doesn't make it any more interesting. Plus, JP Drive, who is the next gen replacement, actually has some decals on him, so there's honestly no real excuse. I do however like that this is the only Apple Racer that has a grille, which does make it stand out a little bit more, I guess. The most interesting thing about the Apple stock car is that one of its contingency sponsors is Retread, a sponsor that didn't return in Cars 3, which kind of just makes me wish that we would have gotten a cool new Retread stock car instead of what's basically just Mackay Car 2.0. Also, Android is way better than Apple, so that's another knock against it there. Now, Lightning McQueen is probably the hardest one on this list to rank, since he is actually a character that we know, and not just a random background racer. I do, however, find most of the other racers more interesting than him. I've always thought that McQueen was a decent character, never one of my favorites, and usually a lot less interesting than the characters around him, per usual for main characters for me, but still a character that can be fun to watch. However, I mostly think that's the case for the first movie, since he goes from a self-centered car to someone who cares for others, so it's fun to see him getting his comeuppance every now and then, since he was kind of a prick in the first movie. I don't think he is as interesting or funny in this movie, which could also be the tone of the movie, with Cars 3 being a more serious movie compared to the first one. I will say though, that McQueen is probably the most likable he has ever been in this movie, and obviously he is a lot better in this movie than he ever was in Cars 2, which is kind of a given. As for his design and paint job, since that's something we can a bit more easily compare to the other racers, I think it's kind of dull. Well, at least his Rusty's paint job that he has in the beginning of the movie, which is the paint job he has when all the other stockers are still racing, so that's the one we're gonna judge. Another thing I realized when I watched Cars 3 was that McQueen never actually says his signature ka-chow. The only time it's mentioned in the movie is when Shakik says it when he is interviewing Jackson Storm. So no Pikachu in this movie, sadly. And that concludes the D tier. Now we're gonna go to the C tier. Our first car in the C tier is McQueen's racing buddy Bobby Swift. Now, what makes Bobby so mid? The biggest problem I have with Bobby is the coloration, Octane Racer in Cars 1 was Billy Oilchanger. He didn't have a crazy design or anything, but what they did have was a really nice color combination of mainly orange with some complementary yellow and black. And I was personally a pretty big fan of this, which just makes me a bit disappointed of what Mr. Swift here could have been. He does thankfully still keep some of the orange, but now he is mostly purple, which where did the purple come from? So yeah, he lost most of the orange, but maybe he will have an awesome design to make up for that. Right? No! It's just these plain stripes and that's it. Now, he was one of the more prominent racers in the movie, so maybe he will have a memorable personality or something, but it seems like he couldn't get that right either, since there's really nothing that sticks out about him, unlike, say, Cal Weathers, who had a lot more personality going on. Heck, even his own next-gen counterpart sticks out more than him, although in large part of the memes.
Wait, you're not Bobby. Hello there.
Overall, not terrible, but could have been a whole lot better. Also, number 58 was way better than number 19, let's just be real. So, a lot of time has passed between Cars 1 and Cars 3, so it makes sense that some sponsors would look a bit different after over 10 years, like with Octane just now. And the sponsor I think changed the most from Cars 1 to Cars 3 would probably have to be Vinyl Toupee. Rev Road Ages here is drastically different from his Cars 1 counterpart, Krusty Rotor. And while Krusty was one of my absolute favorite racers from the first movie, but with his wonderful lavender color scheme and that amazing spray can design on his sides, I can't really say the same thing about Rev here. I appreciate that they wanted to try something so different, though in my opinion, it didn't really pay off that well. The only real thing that got carried over was the vinyl top on the roof, which is good since that is what Vinyl Toupee actually does. Rev here is mostly white, with some small bits of blue. The spray can motif from Krusty is now completely gone, and is instead replaced by what looks to be wood. Interesting for sure, and I do really wish that I would have liked Rev Road Ages more than I do, but he just has one of the messiest color schemes out of any racers, and doesn't really live up to Krusty Rotor. Another thing I wanted to point out is that Rev Road Ages hauler, as well as his pitties, have some pretty prominent purple aspects on them, which makes me question even more why they decided to ditch that color for Rev. When we first got to see the teaser trailer for Cars 3, we saw a ton of different racers. Most of them were old sponsors from the first movie, but there were a couple of new sponsors in there, which was pretty exciting to see. Since they mentioned in the first movie that there were 43 racers, when in actuality there were only 36, I thought these new sponsors would fix that line, by including just enough new sponsors to make it up to that sweet number 43. But as we soon found out, that was not the case, as 7 of the sponsors from the first movie did not return for Cars 3, so you could see these new sponsors as the replacements of the old ones. Personally, I do much prefer the older sponsors, as a lot of the newer ones just aren't as appealing to me, and the weakest of the new sponsors, in my opinion, was Carbon Cyber, with the racer Bobby Rotesta. Bobby number 2 here is probably the racer in Cars 3 that I have the least amount to talk about, except maybe his eventual replacement. His shade of green is certainly nice, and it pairs decently well with the blue, I guess. His hexagon design is also okay, but there is another racer later on who pulls off the hexagon design much better. And that's really all I got for him. Bobby Rotesta certainly is one of the Piston Cup racers of all time. At number 30, we find ourselves Dino Dravsky. Dino is this movie's Clutchade racer, who unlike Kevin Shiftright, who had a pretty solid design, Dino decides to go for a more dull and boring design. The Clutchade logo on him looking like a bandage is a nice touch, but that's really it. With a name like Dino, he honestly could have had some dinosaurs incorporated into his design, which I guess doesn't really have anything to do with Clutchade. Although, what they could have done is have some dinosaur scratches behind the bandages, and maybe even a dinosaur footstep, for good measure. I don't know, it would at least be a bit more engaging. Okay, let's try to find some more positive things to say about him. His colors are okay, I guess, but not as appealing as Kevin's were. I think he should have been one of the first 6 Dark Horse to get the boot, which isn't really nice to him, but I don't care, since he's just a fictional car. If he was the Cal model, then I probably would have liked him more, since then he wouldn't be Dino anymore, but instead Kevin Shiftwright. Wait, that's also kinda mean. Let's just move on. So a thing about Cars diecasts is that they are usually not as commonly available outside of the United States. This is apparent with a lot of the multi-packs, since many of them are exclusive to Walmarts or Targets, something we in Europe don't have. However, back in 2018, there were some diecasts that we in Europe got access to way earlier than the US, which was an uncommon European W for sure, and among those diecasts were Karl Clutchen. Other than that, yeah, he's fine. He is blue with some white here and there. I like all the small squares on his roof and at the back, and that's really about it. Crew stole the number 51 from him. And he also got fired immediately in favor of the Shad that is Harvey Rodcap. So there's that, I guess. At number 28, we have Brick Yardley, our third member of what I like to call the Golden Four. Now, Brick wasn't as prominent as Cal Weathers or Bobby Swift, but he did usually place 4th and was constantly near the top of the pack and had voice lines in the movie. I do find it kind of odd how he just disappears after those first 3 races though. He wasn't seen at Jackson Storm's debut race, was absent in the next race along with Cal and Bobby, and it isn't seen during the whole Next Gen takeover, and is only seen again when he gets fired. Because of Brick's eventual Next Gen replacement, Brick got a new number compared to the Cars 1 racer, just like Bobby Swift. In this case, going from number 61 to 24, which is definitely a downgrade also. As for the design, it's decent. Unlike Bobby, he stays pretty consistent with his counterpart to Cars 1, keeping the green and white that was present on James Cleaner, while also adding in some grey. I do prefer James Cleaner's design though, with the bigger balance of the green and white. So overall, I find Brick to be decent. Next is Darren Leadfoot. Darren here is the first of several racers to return from the first movie, meaning that they all have the same model as Cal Weathers, which is no exception here. Shiny Wax as our sponsor is one that I've never really cared much about, on top of being one of the more forgettable sponsors personally. I will say though that Cars 3 Darren might just be my favorite of all the Shiny Wax racers. He is mostly green, with some lime green and yellow thrown into the mix. My favorite aspect of him has to be the backside of him. Those light and dark green lines reaching from his spoiler down to his bumper look really cool. And then there's also that big shiny circle at the left, which also looks really nice. So as far as Shiny Wax racers go, he's pretty good, but still not amazing. Finishing the C tier is Rex Reveler. Now his design is pretty simple, with some of the yummy Gaskets cookies at the back. I do really like how colorful he is though, what with the red and the blue and the yellow, making for a pretty satisfying color combination. He's honestly one of the racers who is the most similar to the Cars 1 counterpart, with just some small differences from Sage Vanderspin. And while Sage isn't one of my favorites from the first movie, with just having an okay design, it did have a pretty good color scheme, which got carried over thankfully to Rex. I personally would have liked to see more from Rex, like maybe incorporate the cookies a bit more, or maybe make his rim color yellow, because as is, he is just a Sage Vanderspin light. So now let's move to the B tier, except not yet. There is one racer who I struggled with the ranking spot of, who is in a tier of its own. Who is that called? Well... Forget Lightning McQueen, the actual hardest racer to rank on this list is Murray Clutchburn. Murray is probably one of the most interesting racers from Cars 3. First off, he's the same racer from the first movie, which is kind of wild considering how different the two models are. Personally, I would have liked more if they kept the same model from the first movie and just added a new paint job on him. But that's not what's so interesting. The thing with Murray Clutchburn is that he actually has 2 different liveries, which Pixar keep flip-flopping between. His first livery is this one right here. This is how he looked in most shots up until the Los Angeles 500 race, as well as in his Cars 3 concept art. The other one looks like this. which is how he was also seen in the teaser trailer, as well as his artwork from the movie and at the Los Angeles 500 race. This is also what the diecast is based on. Because of this, Murray gets put in his own tier, being the Murray Clutchburn tier. His first design is, in my opinion, incredibly boring. The dark turquoise is way too prominent and there isn't enough orange. If I were to only rank this version of Murray, then he would have probably been ranked 30th. As for his second design, I find that one to be much more enjoyable. It adds orange from the roof to half of his hood. Now this strikes a pretty good balance of his colors, and if I were to just go by this livery, then he would have probably been 20th or so. So I guess the 25th spot is where he will go. Now on to the actual B tier. Terry Kargas, who is most commonly known for 3 things. The first thing is that he is sponsored by Triple Dent, which is a reference to another Pixar movie, that being Inside Out. The second thing is that he got replaced by Cam Spinner, who was in Cars 3 Driven to Win. And the third thing is that they initially gave him the completely wrong model in his diecast. In his diecast, he got put as a Capital Motors Mark II, more commonly known as the Cal Weathers model, instead of an Excello Fission EA model, more commonly known as the Brickyard model. This was eventually fixed though in his 2019 release. As for his design though, it's fine. I think the colors are pretty nice, with all the different shades of blue, and I think his grey rims are fine enough. He was also originally going to be number 21, which means that maybe Cam Spinner would have been called Ryan Laney instead. Who knows? Next on our list is Buck. No, not that Buck. I mean Buck Bearingley. Mr. Bearingley here is a racer that I don't have that much to say about. I think his color scheme is pretty nice. The pattern on his spoiler all the way to his hood is pretty nice though, I will say. I like his name a lot, it rolls off the tongue pretty well. He was seen behind McQueen at the Los Angeles 500. He's probably my favorite using racer, which isn't really a hard bar to reach, but still. Yeah, I've got nothing else, let's just move on. Jimmy Cables, another one that has a new sponsor, him being sponsored by Intersection, which is apparently a dating company. Yeah, hence the magenta color scheme and the prominence of hearts on his design. My favorite thing about him is probably all the hearts present on his hood, which I think looks lovely. Also like his number being 00, that's neat. But that's mostly it though. The rest of his design is kinda boring, with just some roads intersecting with each other. I feel like his magenta livery does a lot of the heavy lifting here, something that his diecast didn't even get right by giving him a much more generic red livery. One thing to note is that he was probably the background stock car that performed the best. He finished 10th at the Dynaco Light 350, 5th at the Iowa Hybrid 450, and even overtaking Swift at one point. Finishing 7th at the Georgia Safety Horn 350, then being seen right behind the top 3 near the end of the Dynaco 400. Finally, well into the next gen takeover, at Jackson Storm's 7th win, he somehow manages to place 3rd, beating out every other racers, including at least 14 next gens, and only losing to Jackson and Lightning. I'm honestly really shocked that he wasn't one of the last remaining stock cars at the Los Angeles 500, instead of like Ponchi or Darren. Next up we have Cal Weathers, who is easily the best among the Golden Four, in my opinion. I just enjoyed seeing him in the movie, since he was the funniest of the 4, and in general, he just had way more personality than Bobby or Brick. Cal Weathers races for Dynaco and is the nephew of Strip Weathers, aka the King. His paint job is the typical Dynaco blue, mixed in with some dark and light blue elements. Part of me wishes that he could have had his own unique model, just like the King, instead of sharing his with some other randos. But oh well, it really isn't that significant. I do also feel kind of sorry for him, not just him getting constantly pranked on, and Tex Dynaco clearly wanting to have McQueen as the Dynaco racer over him, but also because he was inexplicably excluded from Cars 3 Driven to Win. Lightning, Bobby and Brick were all in Cars 3 Driven to Win, and not having Cal there just feels kind of wrong. I'm guessing the reason why he wasn't included was because we already had Cruz as a Dinoco racer in that game, but I feel Cal and Cruz are different enough from each other for both of them to be in the game. Revving up for the 20th spot, we have the racer who got robbed of having a name, Revengo Racer. No, seriously, that's what they actually decided to call them when they released their diecast. I still don't understand to this very day why they never gave them a proper name. And who knows if this racer will ever receive one either, since Mattel just don't seem to want to re-release this racer. Probably just to troll us, TBH. But because of this whole naming situation, I do find there to be some mysterious aura around it. Something intriguing. Another reason for the mystery element is the fact that they are the only stock car not to have an artwork, since most other stock cars either had one from the beginning, while the ones that didn't at least got theirs later on. Name aside, what else can we talk about? Well, first of all, I think the design is really nice. I think they have a nice shade of blue at the front and a nice shade of blue further back. I like the emphasis on the arrows. I really like that their hood is completely orange, which looks really nice. And in general, I think they have a relatively nice amount of orange. Even though I do wish they would have had orange rims, since I think that would have looked even better. Also, it's kind of weird how they don't have the Lightyear text on their fenders, unlike most other stock cars, which is only a problem on their diecast because they have it in the movie. Also wanted to point out that they were the best performer among all the stock cars at the Los Angeles 500, being seen near the top when McQueen exits the pits. Next up we have Lane Lock. Lane Lock, just like Revengo Racer, is another one I find to be rather mysterious. He isn't really seen very much in the movie, but it's also because of his diecast. His diecast is really rare since it's still exclusive to the Race for the Piston Cup 5-pack, which was released all the way back in 2017, that hasn't gotten any re-releases since. And since Mattel doesn't seem to care much about people who live outside of the US, this was a really rare pack here in Europe, so I was unfortunately never able to get this diecast. But talking about Lane Lock himself, I think he has a very nice design, with all the hexagons and whatnot, as well as having a very nice color scheme consisting of blue, green and yellow. I honestly think he is one of the racers that most look like an actual NASCAR car you would see in real life. At least I think, since I don't actually watch NASCAR. What? All in all, a very pleasant car, who I hopefully can admire up close someday. Also, since I'm always trying to be strategic when I buy my diecasts, so I never end up with duplicates, I was holding off on buying a Cars-free Ponchi diecast, so I could get him in this pack. But since I was never able to get this pack, I still don't have a Cars-free diecast of Ponchi. So I'm just gonna go and purchase one online right now, and maybe by the time we get to Ponchi on this list, the diecast will have arrived. We'll see. Crash landing his way onto the 18th spot, we have Speedy Comet. I just want to start off by saying that I love his name. Speedy Comet. It's such a different name compared to what we're used to. Since Bobby Swift went and ditched orange as his main color, on top of our other semi-orange sponsor from Cars 1, Fiber Fuel, not returning to Cars 3, I'm at least happy that one of the new sponsors decided to be orange. In addition to orange, he is also blue, which makes for a pretty satisfying livery. The front is only orange and the back is only blue, with the exceptional blinker symbols that are orange. I also really like his tires, what with the blue rims paired with the orange trims. There isn't much more that I have to say about him, other than that I wish he wasn't one of the first 6 stock cars to get the boot, since it would have been nice to see him a little bit more in the movie. I mean, come on, his name is Speedy Comet for crying out loud. He should not be fired this early with a name like that. Also, he was gonna win the Dinoco Light 350, until Lightning McQueen came with his plot armor and ruined it! Boo! Bad ending. My man got so distraught that he fell off the top 10 altogether. Poor guy. Now here's a classic, Chip Gearings. One of the first Cars-free stock cars revealed as a diecast, and in fact the first one out of the new sponsors to get his diecast revealed. Also a fact is that he is the third car now in a row to be of one of the new sponsors, as well as our last one on the list, and he only made it to B tier, which is kind of sad. So, what makes Ship the best one out of these perfectly serviceable new sponsors. First off, I think his design is really cool. I really like the line charts he has on his sides, which not only makes sense for the sponsor, since Combustor is an online banking trademark, but also makes for a good transition between the blue and the green. I think the textures on his green coloring is nice, as well as the sort of net design on his white areas. An internet design, if you will. The color scheme is alright, not bad, but certainly not a personal favorite of mine. I will say though that this is basically just Dino Kravsky's color scheme, but more interesting, since Ship has the dark blue, green and white that is present on most Clutch-Shade racers, on top of having a more engaging design. So a pretty nice racer as far as the new sponsors go. TG Castlnut of the Revolting Rebuild Alternators Racing Team. The Cars 1 Revolting racer, Dave Apex, or Dave Alternators, or TG Castlnut, wait what? He was a racer who I've always thought was pretty good, but nothing extraordinary. I thought he had an okay color scheme with a pretty good design, with all of those plus and minuses on his grey areas. TG Castlnut takes Dave's design and just replaces all the white with red, as well as amping up the amount of grey. These are all changes that I'm totally down with, and he just ends up looking a lot better than Davey. Like most people usually point out, TG is actually a lot more similar to the Revolting racer from Cars the video game, Bashman, so I guess TG can't take all the credit by removing the white in favor of more red. Another cool detail about Castlnut is that the plus and minuses aren't just exclusive to the red areas, but also are on large portions on the red areas too. Another thing is, much like Speedy Comet, is that I wish TG would have been in the movie for a bit longer, instead of also being one of the first stock cars to get fired. Like, why couldn't they have instead fired Dino, or Rev, or Carl? Oh wait. And that wraps up the B tier. Now on to the A tier. Jak and the A tier pack. We've got Jak the Post. So, what's so great about our little postman here? The first thing is his color scheme. He has an awesome shade of purple, which fades really cool into the white on his sides. Secondly, there's the color yellow, and as a huge fan of Waluigi myself, I'm obviously a big fan of the purple plus yellow combo. One thing that does bring him down a little bit is the design. It's fine, but nothing too special. I'm also not a huge fan of the humongous toe cap logo on his hood. Rusty Cornfuel from Cars 1 I feel like nailed it when it comes to the logo. The text wasn't too big, and there was also the hitch protector icon, which isn't there on Post-it's hood. With some small tweaks here and there, I think Jacques Lepotte could have been in the top 10, but either way, still a solid enough racer. Also, I just now realized what toe cap actually is and what that logo is supposed to represent, and my innocence is officially gone. Parking his way to the 14th spot, we have Parker Breakstone. Parker is pretty similar to our last entry, where I adore his color scheme, but don't think much of his design. His design is a bit more interesting though, with these green lines, which are a bit more prominent than the yellow on the pot. Purple and green is a color combination that has always been pretty epic, and it's no different here. My biggest problem with Parker is that there isn't enough green. I for one would have loved it if he had green rims, or maybe have his whole hood be green, Rev & Go Racer and TG Castlnut style. But hey, at least they gave him green on his diecast, unlike Manny Flywheel who got this lime color instead, for some reason. Also on the topic of Manny Flywheel, I find it weird how they keep giving so little screen time to these N2O Cola racers. Manny Flywheel was probably the Cars 1 racer that was the hardest one to spot, since he only appears in a couple of handful of scenes. And the same can be said about Parker, who was one of the unfortunate stalkers to get fired off the rip, which certainly didn't help with the screen time department. At 13th place we've got Bruce Miller. He's yet another car like Lane Lock, which I don't have the diecast of. I was going to buy the pack he was in, but right as I was gonna do that, he got announced for the Dan Corsia 10 pack, so I decided to hold off and get him in that pack instead. If the pack would show up for a bloody decent price here in Europe! By the time I realized that the 10 pack wasn't going to show up, the original Bruce Miller pack had already skyrocketed in price, so no Bruce for me. So, let's talk about his design. I really like it. He basically keeps everything about Winford Bradford Rutherford that was good, with color and everything. There are of course some differences, like him having orange rims instead of the blue, which I do personally think is a downgrade from Winford, but he does however, just like Rev & Go Racer and TJ Casanot, have a fully colored hood, in this case being colored blue, which contrasts really nicely with the yellow around him, and overall I think is an upgrade from Winford. They also kept the number 64 design intact from Winford, which, thank goodness, since I love how the 64 looks on him. Phil Tankson. A racer much like Rex Reveler really didn't change a whole lot from its Cars 1 counterpart. In this case, I'm more on board with that, since Aiken Axler, or Alan, definitely, is a racer who I'm way more fond of than Sage Vanderspin. The biggest difference between Phil and Aiken is probably the roof. On Aiken, there was a fiery orange design, while on Phil, the orange covers the whole roof. Well, at least on his diecast, since in the movie he actually barely has any orange at all, and it's instead mostly red. Personally, I vastly prefer his diecast where the backer ends of him are red, which then fades into the orange further in. But, either way, it's still an awesome color combination, whichever way you look at it. There are a lot of interesting stock cars from Cars 3, but I think the one that fascinates me the most would have to be Ponche Wipeout. So, what is so intriguing about this bumper save car? Well, let's go back to the year 2017. When we first saw the prototype picture of his diecast, nothing really seemed to be out of the ordinary, but when it came time to his actual release, that's when things started getting weird. First off, he inexplicably had black eyelids top and bottom, which was something he not only didn't have in the movie, but also looked really odd. It seriously looks like he could be a part of the Beagle Boys or something. But the strangest thing was that there were in fact two versions of Ponche upon release, one with basic black rims and the other with out of place yellow rims, which I actually find to be more appealing. The black rims felt like they were the correct ones, but as we would later see in the movie, the correct colors of his rims were indeed the yellow ones. It was kind of hard to see, since he was relatively hard to spot in the movie, and there was only like really one or two shots where we could actually see him with his tires. It also didn't help that he wasn't seen with any artwork in the movie, since he was one of the few stock cars not seen in that scene with Natalie Certain. The year after, in 2018, Ponche was one of the lucky Cars 3 stock cars that received a hauler. The most interesting thing about this release is that on the backside of the packaging, we saw Ponche Wipeout with yellow rims, as well as having proper blue eyelids. Strange. In 2019, he finally was available in his movie-accurate state, blue eyelids everything, but only through a 11 pack. To make matters worse, there were some versions of the pack that included the old Ponche instead. Later in that year, however, it did get re-released as a single, receiving an artwork too in the process. But that's not where the story ends, because the year after in 2020, they released a diecast of the next-gen bumper save hauler, which instead of calling it Paul Conrab's hauler, they for some reason call it Ponche Wipeout's hauler. Seriously, Ponche even had a diecast of a hauler back in Cars 1. How many does he need? They did thankfully rectify this mistake later, and actually gave the hauler a proper name. So that's the history of Ponche Wipeout. But how do I find him as a racer? Really cool actually. He's probably the most complex out of any stock car in terms of design, but with all the lines and especially the sheer amount of colors on him. There's blue, red, white/beige, yellow, and sometimes even black. Like I said before, I do like the yellow rims on him more, which just adds to this crazy... Who the fuck is sending me a message? I'm trying to record a video here, like, I'm so tired of all these godforsaken notifications. Like, what is it this time? Oh, your package has arrived. What pack? Oh wait, it's my Ponche Wipeout package. It has just arrived at my local grocery store. I guess I'll just head over there and get it now. Sure. Okay, so I've gone to the grocery store and boom, I got the package. So now let's get him out of here. Here we... You're not Ponche. Name's Noah, bro. Okay, let's see here. Oh, he's loose. Oh, okay, I got him. Oh, and it's yellow rims. Okay, that's. I don't know where. I don't know where the backside of. Oh, wait. Oh. Well, I guess it's cool. It's it's just loose. Okay, well, I'm gonna get him out. Boom. After, I don't know how, 6 years since Cars 3 came out, I have Ponchi. Great. Took me a while enough. Yeah. Now we've finally made it to the top 10. We will find... Wait, what's this? No. At number 10, we've got Marcus Crankslow, who not only is a wonderfully designed racer, but is an honest-to-God, great Transbury Use racer. Finally! I've never really understood the hype behind Transbury Use. Lee Revkins is one of the weaker Cars 1 racers in my eyes, and Medford is an overrated eyesore to my eyes. And then there's Bubba Wheelhouse, who we will get to in the next gen ranking list, but spoilers, he's also kinda mid. Marcus though, Marcus is the real shit. The only thing that Lee has over Marcus is the fact he has a better number, since 63 is far superior to the number 6, but the rest, Marcus easily clears. The bubbles on Lee looked fine, but they are really allowed to pop out here and look exceptionally rad. I also just think that his color scheme works a lot better for Transbury Use. Lee was just purple and yellow, and that was fine. Medford was just a boring blue with yellow, but adding both purple and the blue into the mix, and boom, we got this wonderful array of colors. And the use portion on his sides actually looked like something drinkable, on top of looking really clean. Now this is how you do a Transbury Use racer. Medford, take notes, you piece of shit. Floyd Mulvihill, another racer to originate from the first movie, who just like Murray Clutchburn, has undergone a substantial change in his model, which, personally speaking, I think this new model of him fits way better than his older one. It could be because I associate the more blockier models, such as Husker Morocco or Studgy Suave EX, with more older racers, since a lot of them with these models, like Claude Scruggs, James Cleaner and Ernie Gearson, seem to have been racing for a long time. Meanwhile, Floyd Mulvihill was stated to start racing in 2005. I guess he could have just started racing late into his life, but oh well. Floyd is also notable for appearing semi-prominently in a Duracell commercial, where McQueen pulls the same technique to pass Floyd as he did in the first movie. Also, he was the first of the returning racers from Cars 1 to get replaced by an X-Gen, which is unfortunate. If I were to pick one background stock car to make it to the Los Angeles 500, it would probably be Floyd. Gasprin, being based on the real-life aspirin, which is commonly used to reduce, for example, pain, while the Cars version of this is used to reduce pain under a car's hood, hence the slogan Hood Ache Relief. In Cars 1, this was presented by circular tablet pills, while in Cars 3, they instead decided to go for a capsule pill design. This is not only a great evolution of the same concept, but it just generally looks a lot better too. I mean, look at them all. Look how many pills there are on Floyd, from his hood to his trunk, and then there's the Gasprin logo, which is simple, but just so damn awesome. The gas being on one side and the print on the other, so great. When it comes to design, he is for sure one of the best. So why isn't he any higher? Well, it's the color scheme. Now, it's not bad by any means, but despite being a Swede myself, I don't really find the blue plus yellow color scheme to be all that exciting. Floyd does make it a bit more interesting than his Cars 1 counterpart, by throwing in some slight bluish purple, but it wasn't really that much. At the same time, throwing in too many colors could potentially ruin it, so I'm not really sure how I would approve upon him, without staying too far from what Gasprin is supposed to be. Reb Miko. Ah yes, good old tank coat. Now pink is my favorite color, so naturally I would be a pretty big fan of Eugene Carbureski. He's got an awesome model, design, color scheme, and name. So does Reb Miko here live up to that? Well, not necessarily, since I think he's weaker in pretty much all of those points, but not by that much. First off, the design. It's really nice. I love how the yogurt looks on him, which honestly looks better on him than it did on Eugene, what with stock cars in Cars 3 having more of modern 3D designs, compared to the first movie's more old school designs. However, there is one big issue I have with Reb that keeps him back a bit, and that is the lack of white. The white was pretty prominent on Eugene. Reb Miko, on the other hand, barely has any white. There's a little bit, but not enough. I think white rims could have suited him pretty well. But with all of these complaints, I still really like him, if you couldn't tell by him being so high up. Could have been greater, but it's still awesome as is. Also, I like gray areas on him. Next up, we have Tommy Highbanks. Now, if you're an older viewer of mine, then you might remember that in my first ever ranking list of the Cars 3 veteran racers, Tommy Highbanks was at dead last. But now he has shot his way up to the top 10. And why is that, you may ask? Well, the simple reason is that I was a buffoon back then who clearly didn't see the greatness that is almighty Tommy Highbanks. I used to think his design was ugly, but thankfully I have seen the light, and that is no longer the case. Tommy Highbanks has been on my mind a lot as of recently. When I'm sleeping, Tommy. When I'm studying, Tommy. When I'm taking my driver's license, I keep wishing that I was driving Tommy Highbanks instead. I think I may have a problem. So, what makes Tommy so great? First off, I really like his design. I am a person who loves spending time in nature and taking walks in forests, which would you look at that? Tommy's got trees at his sides, on top of having some cool off-road decals on his hood and roof. One thing I also appreciate about Tommy is that, for me at least, he feels like a perfect evolution to Johnny Blamer. Now, Johnny is a solid racer in of itself, but has never really been one of my absolute favorites. I wish that I liked him more than I do, but I guess he just doesn't have that Tommy magic to him. But Johnny's design is still solid, which Tommy takes and improves on in almost every single way. First of all, I like the bigger emphasis on that wonderful shade of green. The blue looked nice on Johnny, but I think the green taking more center stage and the blue not being as prominent was a good choice. Secondly, Tommy replaces the white from Johnny with some yellow, which I think fits and looks way nicer. Another thing I like about Tommy is that he has a grill, and I just think that's a great fit. He also reminds me of Nigel Gearsley, the best World Grand Prix racer, so that's cool. So overall, Tommy Highbanks is an awesome character that I'm terribly sorry for not appreciating sooner. Heck, maybe I still don't appreciate him fully, considering he is only and only in the A tier. Now I might catch some flack from this next one, but at number 6, as well as the racer at the top of my A tier, we have ourselves Ernie Gearson. Now, I love Ernie, and I'm going to stand on that hill until the day I die, because this guy gets way too much hate for no reason. Like, no wonder he's the only stock car that is sat on his diecast. So what do I find so great about Ernie here? Firstly, I think he has some of the best blue coloration out of the endless sea of blue racers. The light blue looks great, and I love how it turns into that wonderful dark blue color on his front. I love the small little snowflakes on him, which gives me a lovely winter feeling. I find the mint leaves on him to be extremely satisfying, and like how I mentioned before, I really like that he has an expression that is so different from all the other Cars 3 stock cars. He is also mentioned to be one of the oldest racers in Cars 1, meaning that he is probably the oldest in Cars 3. So I, like many other people, usually envision Ernie as the old man, or the grandpa at the track. Come on Mattel, Santa Ernie when? My only real gripe with him is the same one I had for Murray Touchburn, and that is that I wish he would have remained in his old model from Cars 1, with his new design intact. One thing that the diecast got wrong were his rims. In the movie, he has blue rims, while his diecast has white rims with blue trims, just like in Cars 1. Personally, I don't have a preference between the two, but I just wanted to point it out. Anyways, that was the last car in the A tier. Now let's dive into the S tier. What better way to start the S tier than with Dud Throttleman? Now, I think that Mood Springs is probably the most consistently good sponsor, with no real duds. Shaq Armstrong is an S tier driver in the first movie, and Banks is an S tier racer in the video game, and Dud kept that up by being the third straight S tier Mood Springs car in a row. Let's see if Ed Trunken can follow that up. So what makes Mood Springs and Dud Throttleman so great? First off, he has a funny name, Dud Throttleman. Secondly, his mixture of colors are pretty darn amazing too. His main color is blue, and just like every other Mood Springs racer, it is a really nice shade of blue too. Pair it up with some white and dark grey, and bada bing bada boom. He retains that awesome number 33 design, which first of all is a fun number in general, but it also looks great, with it looking like a twisty spring, because, you know, Mood Springs. Another thing is the dark blue that so seamlessly fades into a slightly lighter shade of blue on his front. This is something that the diecast kind of fumbled on, since there it's just white for some reason. Like, why did he spill milk all over his mouth? All in all, an awesome racer that keeps up the great Moodsprings legacy. Though I will say that I feel really sorry for the Moodsprings racers. First, Chuck Armstrong gets to be the most wrecked car in the first movie, then Banks gets to be one of the worst performers out of any racers in the video game, and then Dud gets to be one of the first 6 stock cars to get fired. Truly a travesty. At number 4, we have Rolf Carlo. He was the Little Turkey Pistons racer in the first movie and has since then grown a grill. Rolf in Cars 1 was one of my absolute favorites, and while I don't find his Cars 3 iteration to be as good, it's still of course really good. Firstly is his number. Number 123 and 121 and even 101 from the first movie are kinda generic numbers, while 117 is definitely the most exciting of the bunch. Secondly is the colors. Rolf sports the classic Americana, or French, or Luxembourgian, etc. color scheme of blue, red and white. I like the design too, with the red wave on the sides, as well as that red line from his trunk to roof to hood, making way for some fancy cars to drive on. But of course, I can't talk about a Little Turkey Pistons racer without mentioning its mascot, Little Miss Piston. I love this little gal. Ever since I was a kid, I have admired this funny little piston, and thankfully, it's still present here on Cars 3 Ralph. One thing that I actually think that Cars 3 Ralph does better than his older self is with Little Miss Piston here. She was there in Cars 1, but she was pretty tiny on the design though. Luckily, she is way bigger on Cars 3 Ralph, making her way easier to see. If there is one complaint I have with Cars 3 Ralph, it would probably be that there isn't enough white. Some more would have been nice, but it isn't a big issue. To end it off, Rolf Carlo probably has my favorite expression out of any stock car diecast from this movie. There are some other racers too that look determined, but Rolf, he's just extra excited while doing so. I mean, look at him. Does this look like a dude who is determined to win a race, or someone who is holding in laughter? You decide. Now I may sound a bit contradictory with this next one, but at number 3 we have ourselves Todd Marcus. Todd Marcus here has gone through a massive change from his Cars 1 days. Todd has since then ditched the black altogether in favor of some dark blue and cyan. On one hand, I'm a bit sad that the black had to go, but his new look is just so vibrant and so much fun. And unlike Bobby Swift, who made orange his secondary color, and not even a very prominent one at that, Todd still keeps red as the main color. So the colors are phenomenal, but what about the design? Luckily, that's great too. OG Todd Marcus had his checkered design with the white and black. However, the new Todd still keeps that. It's a lot more subtle now, but if you look closely, you can still see it on his hood, as well as his dark blue areas. The colors also flow really well together. I like that most of his front is red, while the middle and the back are dark blue, and then the roof being completely cyan. I guess my only complaint with number 123 here, which isn't really a problem about him, more so the sponsor, is that I don't find the logo all that appealing. It's made to look like cursive, which I just find to be an ugly form of text writing. And the runner-up on this list is Brian Spark. As you may know, Claude Scruggs is my absolute favorite Piston Cup racer. So obviously, his replacement would have some pretty tough shoes to fill. Or rather, tires to fill. Brian Spark retains a lot of the good elements from Claude Scruggs, but instead of just doing the same design again, like with Rex or Phil, he instead uses those things to make something totally new and exciting. First of all, he keeps all the wonderful colors. The yellow, the black, the white, the whole shebang. He also keeps the drip pans, which is what Nicholas produces, on the sides, and the drip pans on his sides are in fact different sizes from each other. The one on his left is rather small and doesn't take up that much space, while the one on his right almost takes up all the space. Don't quote me on this, but I believe Brian Spark is the only stock car with an asymmetrical design. which is honestly something I wish more racers would do. So he keeps the drip pans as well as the oil drops behind the number 52s. But then we get to the aspect which differs the most from Claude, which is the oil design on him. Claude had a bit of it, but Brian goes all out with it. The most notable usage of this is at the front, where it's painted with a big splat of oil, and it looks really darn slick too. The size of it is perfect. It doesn't take up too much room, but not too little either. The oil is not too thick nor too skinny. We also see this design further back, because it was just too awesome not to throw it in there too. Though I will say on his diecast, since he doesn't have his mouth open, it kind of just looks like these eyes staring at you. Kind of weird that they decided that this would be the only brick model racer to have a closed mouth, but oh well, even though they did open his mouth on his Thailand diecast. While we're talking about the diecast, I also want to mention that they gave him a more dark brown color instead of black, so it kind of just looks like he is covered with chocolate. I think if I had one complaint, it would be that there could have been slightly more black. Claude had a lot of black on him, and besides the oily design on Brian, it isn't really seen much elsewhere. Maybe if almost his entire backside would be black, then that would have maybe been enough. So yeah, Brian makes for a very satisfying follow-up to Claude, in terms of staying true to the Leakless sponsorship as well as trying new things. Boy, I sure can't wait to see what they will do with the next gen Leakless racer. How's the yellow, black and the white gonna look together? How is a futuristic Leakless logo gonna look like? How are they going to incorporate the drip pans in an awesome modern way? It's totally going to be great, right? Right? If you have seen any of my other ranking lists I have done of the Cars 3 veteran racers, then you probably already know who my number 1 is. But taking the spot once again as my favorite Cars 3 stock car is Dirksen D'Agostino. Now, why do I love Dirksen here so much? Well, it's honestly everything about him. First off, he's a returning racer from the first movie, which I personally like since it's nice to see that at least some of the racers from the first movie are still around, and speaking of which, he's the only one of the returnees to have been in the RPM model in the diecast line, so that's neat. Secondly, his paint job. His colors are absolutely stunning, black being his main color, but with a really nice shade of green to complement it. So color scheme wise, he stays true to the original, with the green just being a bit darker. The design is awesome too. The green just looks so damn awesome swaying in different areas. They also kept the little flower design that his Cars 1 version had going for him, but now making them modernized, looking more like flower petals. Dirksen D'Agostino also throws in some grey on his spoiler to make it stick out even more. In his diecast, he has even more grey on him, with both his eyelids and the rims of his tires being grey. Personally, I do prefer the black eyelids for him, but on the other hand, I think the grey rims look better than his black rims with white trims that he has in the movie. So my ideal Dirksen would look like this. Oh yeah, his name too, Dirksen D'Agostino, which is just a really pretty name. Now, you may have noticed that I have been pronouncing him as Dirksen D'Agostino instead of Dirksen D'Agostino. That's actually because the name Agostino originates from Italy, and when a name starts with a D followed by an apostrophe, you pronounce it like it's the same word. So, D'Agostino in this case. Just that there's an apostrophe there, and you don't actually pronounce them as separate words. So, D'Agostino is actually wrong. Just wanted to mention this, since basically no one seems to pronounce him in the correct way. If I were to have one complaint about Dirksen, then it's that I wish they would have kept the "smellier later" slogan that was seen on him in the first movie, which to be honest is just a really small nitpick that maybe wouldn't even have fitted with his newer design. Also, it seems that he has lost his grill from the first movie, I just wanted to point that out. And those are some reasons why I love Dirksen and why he is my favorite Cars 3 stock car veteran racer. And that concludes the ranking of all the Cars 3 stock cars. I'm considering on making a ranking list like this one, but for the next gens, so tell me if you would be interested in that. Anywho, thanks for watching!